Okay, so we're thinking about the Sphirot, the divine attributes, and their equivalent and the way they are reflected in the soul powers of the human being. We mentioned yesterday that even though there are 10 Sphirot, there are 10 divine attributes. We are focusing on the 7 emotional attributes because they're a unit for itself. They correspond to the 7 days of creation and relevant to the time of the year we are in right now, the period of 7 days. 7 weeks between Passover and the giving of the Torah are traditionally considered a period of introspection and spiritual growth. And every day when we count the Omer, we mention one of the 7 Sphirot. Every week has its own focus of one Sephira, and every day we have one specific Sphira within that general Sphira, because all 7 can include each other, and you get 49. That's already for another discussion, how each one encompasses all of them. But for now, we're going to focus today, hopefully, on the second group of the 7 emotional Sphirot. Yesterday, we discussed the first 3. And today we hope to discuss the second 3. So just very briefly, in under 60 seconds, yesterday we discussed chesed, which is loving kindness, which is expression. We discussed, so it's flowing outward. I want to give, I want to become one with somebody else or with something. That's the right side. Then you have the left side, which is the opposite, which is to hold back, restraint, holding back and concealment. We discussed that could mean respect or giving space for somebody else or respecting their perspective. That is not the expansion of self, it's making space for somebody else. And in between was the beauty or harmony, tiferet, which blends the two, which allows me at times to express myself, at times to make space for somebody else. We also discussed that is also the idea of compassion, where compassion has a little bit of kindness, as well as it doesn't negate the perspective of judgment altogether, as we discussed yesterday. Okay, today's agenda is the next 3, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. In fancy Hebrew, that means Netzach is victory, Hod is, it's a tricky word to translate. We'll translate hold as splendor or beauty. We'll just say Hod, I guess splendor. And then you have Yesod, which is foundation. And at least the second 2, the name doesn't really capture it fully. So give us a moment and we'll get to there and we'll elaborate upon what this means. So we have the second 3. What is in other words, a second group of 3. So from the Kabbalistic perspective, yesterday, the Sphirot we discussed yesterday, the group of 3 primary emotions were considered, as I just said, primary emotions. Chesed, love, gvura, holding back, tiferet, compassion, are your primary emotions. They call them, those are the parents. And now what we're going to discuss today is a little bit different. The second 3 it's considered branches of the first 3. So if you're thinking of a tree, you have the root and then you have the branch. The branch is secondary to the trunk of the tree. And within the human being's soul powers, the same is true. Your primary emotions, when you feel emotion, a strong, powerful emotion within your heart, it's some mixture of the first 3. But the first 3 are not enough. You need the second 3. And to understand this, to explain, we'll look at I don't have the picture here to place, but if you Google the 10 Sphirot, you typically would see a picture of a human body, because the Zohar, Tikkunei Zohar, talks about the 10 Sphirot, how each Sphira corresponds to one part of the human anatomy. And we'll go to what the Sphirot we discussed yesterday. Chesed, kindness, is right hand. Gevura, strength. Respect is left hand. And Tiferet, compassion, is the torso, is the center of the person. Okay, but you cannot have a person just with hands and a torso. You need something else. What do you need? You need legs, or thighs or legs, but let's think about legs. So legs is, in some sense, it's outside the body. It's not the person himself, it's not the torso, it's outside the body, but it allows for the expansion of the body. If I'm perfectly comfortable sitting here in one place, But if I want to go somewhere, if I want to do something, if I want to move outward, that's when I need my legs. So the second group of 3 sfirot are considered the legs of the person. There's only 2 legs, right side and the left side, Netzach and Hod. And then the Yesod, the foundation, which we'll also hopefully get to today, is considered in the body, it's considered the male reproductive organ. Again, it's not critical to the body, but it's the way the body interacts with something outside of itself. So we will elaborate upon all of this. So what do I mean when I say that it's not the primary emotion? It's just a leg of the emotion, the practical side of the emotion. So I'm going to try to illustrate by bringing an example or 2, and hopefully this will clarify at least a little bit. So it's easier to understand it with Netzach. So we'll go next to Sfira number 4, soul power number 4, which is Netzach, which is victory. Think about victory for a second. So if you think about victory, you think about the metaphor of battle. And if you think about battle, you think about an army. And if you think about an army, you think about a soldier. So let's say I'm a soldier and I sign up to defend my country. Why do I sign up to defend my country? Because I am a patriot. And a patriot means that I love my fatherland. I love my country. So I have this deep desire to love my country, and that's an emotion. And I am fueled by that emotion. I go and I sign up to the army. Okay. A few months later, or a few years later, I'm in the battlefield and some dude from another army is shooting at me. Okay. Right now I need inspiration to go and move forward. I don't not necessarily can I feel the great love to my country that inspired me at the moment that I signed up to the army at the first time. So I can't fall back on the ahava, on the chesed, on the love. So if it would just be on love alone, I wouldn't have any motivation when the challenging time arrives. But thankfully, in my soul, there's the power of victory, power of endurance. And victory tells me, part of me wants to win. Part of me says, if I love something and I signed up for something, then I want to overcome any challenge to see this thing through. Now, it's not a primary emotion because I don't feel the love right this moment, but it is an emotion because it has tremendous amount of power. The power of victory, the power that somebody wants to win, or even win at all costs, is a very powerful force within the human psyche, as we will hopefully explain. So I brought the example of the army because of the victory, because that's all the Kabbalah brings. But the same thing would be for anything. You sign up to a project, you sign up to go to medical school. Why do you want to go to medical school? Because you love the idea of helping people. Okay, you're 3 years in, you're tired, you're burnt out. You don't necessarily feel the love to help people. In fact, right now, you probably don't want to see anybody. So why are you standing up and studying at 12 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning? It's because you have this soul power called endurance. I signed up, I want to be victorious, I want to overcome. It has a tremendous amount of energy, yet it's not the primary emotion, it's considered the branch of the emotion. So that is the power of Netzach, of the power of victory. Now, we also refer to it, this Hebrew word Netzach, victory, also means endurance. Netzach, endurance, it could last, it could survive. And this is another interesting angle that we have with endurance, with Netzach, with victory. So when you have the emotion is a spiritual feeling. I love, I'm in awe, I have compassion. It's a spiritual feeling. Now, I don't know what they told you in Hollywood, but these emotions, because they're spiritual, they're elusive. They come and they go. You cannot have it all the time. I know all the books say they fell in love and they lived happily ever after, painting the picture as the love always stays. That is not accurate. From the perspective of the Kabbalah, love and any emotion, a primary emotion, cannot last all the time. It's going to retreat and it's going to reinvigorate itself, but it's not present fully all the time. So how am I committed to my goal? So therefore, love itself, or kindness, or love, the desire to become one, is not enduring. I could be in love at 8 o'clock in the morning. By 8:10, I moved on. Now I love something else. But the person has the power of victory, of endurance, which means that even though I don't feel the primary emotion of love burning in my soul at this moment, nevertheless, I could, and I'm able to stick to my plan, stick to my commitment, and push forward and overcome the obstacles and achieve what I need to achieve, despite the fact that the primary emotion is elusive. The secondary emotion, the branches, are enduring. So that's how. Hopefully we at least gave a little bit of to explain what netzach. Okay, what netzach is, what endurance is. Now with these sfirot, to understand it properly, we have to contrast it with the other side. So we have netzach. We have the right leg. Now let's think about the left leg. What is the left leg for a second? And that's the sphira number 5. When we have both 4 and 5 together, the right leg and the left leg, we'll understand maybe a little bit better, and then we'll open it up if anybody wants to make a comment. So what is hod? Hod comes from the word beauty, so it can mean beauty. It can also mean splendor. It can also mean hoda'ah, comes from the word to acknowledge. And I don't know if there's a perfect word for this, but the word we're going to use, hopefully, is that there's a certain ability that the person has to almost like submit to something greater than self. Right? So victory is a lot about myself. I want to win. I want to win at all costs. Almost it's like my ego is at stake. That's a very powerful force within the human being. So that is something that is about me, expansion of self. The right side is always about the expansion of self. The left side is holding self back. So in this sense, sphera number 5, which is on the left side, is can I submit to something greater than me? And that's also a very powerful force, because I am limited. How much can I do? How inspired am I? But if I commit myself to a cause greater than self, then I can achieve tremendous amount of things. And I'll give you a metaphor that I heard when I was first studying this, and it's a beautiful metaphor that would capture the difference between the sphera number 4 and number 5, the victory and the ability to submit. So let's say you have 2 people who are in the workforce, assuming there's a workforce, assuming that there's no corona, assuming that people are working. So you have 2 people in the workforce. There's 2 types of people. One type of person is a person whose primary emotion is victory. What do I mean victory? This guy needs a challenge to overcome. If there's no challenge, he's not inspired, not interested. He needs a crisis. Some people, they flourish under a crisis. I'm not going to mention names of politicians. Some politicians are good, some are bad, some are very bad, but in the moment of crisis, they shine. Okay, some people need opposition. If there's no challenge, they're bored. Then you have another person who every single day for 30 years catches the train at 5:50 in the morning, gets to work at the same time, puts in the hours, very committed to the goal, no excitement, no drama, doesn't want opposition, doesn't want victory, doesn't want to overcome other people, very committed to a cause, to a goal. And that's a different skill. There's a woman in Greenwich who told me her father's from the UK. He retired, he's in his 80s. He never took a day off. He was a factory worker. Never in his life did he take a day off above what the holidays in the UK were. Okay? This is a person who has endurance. He has what they call hod. He has submission. There's a sense of beauty. He's sort of dedicated to something greater than self, to the corporation, to the purpose, to the economy, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these 2 people, who's better? Who would you rather have on your team if you're running a business? Well, the answer, of course, is you better have both types of people. If you're running a bank or you're running a corporation and you only have people who know how to show up on time, but they don't thrive on crisis, they don't want to overcome the challenge and be victorious, then when the challenge comes, you're in trouble. If you have people that thrive on challenge, and when there's a problem, they can overcome. And if there's a battle, they'll be victorious, but they can't show up in time to open up the storefront, you're in trouble as well. So the point is that with you, in a corporation, you need both those skills. And believe it or not, in life itself, you also need both these skills. You need the power of victory. You need the power, the ability to overcome in a challenging circumstance, but you also need the power to be dedicated and devoted to something without the drama. It's just considered commitment. And that's a beautiful soul power. And it's also very, very powerful soul power. It's a little bit different than the victory, but it's similar in the sense that at the time you don't feel the great love. You don't feel the primary emotion. You feel it's more the practical side of the emotion. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit about Sphira 4 and 5. We'll get to 6 in a moment, but before we get to number 6, we'll open up the floor. Let's see if I want to add something. Okay, just to add one little detail, going back to Netzach, going back to victory. So victory is a very powerful force within yourself, as I said. So if I'm in a, it's almost in any, if I'm in a challenging circumstance, whatever the case is, and I could awaken within myself this power that I want to overcome at all costs. I want to be victorious at all costs. Very, very powerful force. But within a relationship, you have to be very careful because, like we mentioned yesterday, all these soul powers are powerful. They can be positive or negative. The same thing is within the idea of Netzach, victory, which is victory at all costs, which is also very powerful. Let's say we're in a relationship, or we're business associates, or we're debating, whatever the case is. It's very easy to get confrontational and then awaken within our opponent the attribute of victory at all costs. Okay, you see how in a relationship that would be destructive, right? In other words, if I'm debating you, I'm disagreeing with you, or have a different perspective, but I'm opposing you, and I become the opposition, then it's you have to be careful, because I can trigger within the other person the negative expression of the desire to win at all costs, and therefore the other person will shoot back and come back forcefully, even if he's harming the relationship, and even if he knows he's harming the relationship, there still is this super powerful force within the soul to want to be victorious. It's our job to use that force for the positive, which means to fuel us and give us the strength to overcome challenging circumstances, but not to destroy a relationship when I'm debating with somebody else or disagreeing with somebody else. So that's just an illustration where a very, very powerful force could be used both for the positive and for the negative. So this is a little bit, at least a little bit, on the power of Netzach, victory, overcoming challenge, overcoming opposition. I almost need the opposition to trigger within me the power of Netzach, the power of victory, right? It's like you can't play basketball by yourself. You could for a few minutes, then you get tired if you're like me, right? If you have somebody else who's about to win you, now all of a sudden all the adrenaline starts running, and now you're pumped, and now you're ready for battle. Well, who did that to you? You couldn't awaken that within yourself. You needed the challenge to awaken that within yourself. You needed to be challenged to be able to touch that part of your soul. And then there's the ability to behold, to submit. I'm not inspired right now, but there's something greater than me. I'm going to submit to something greater than myself. And that can also mean something as simple as saying the Hebrew word for hod is also hodah, is also being thankful, thanksgiving. We're not going to go into it right now, but the concept of being thankful also takes a degree of submission. I have to acknowledge that you did something for me that I could not do for myself. I have to acknowledge that I'm vulnerable. I have to acknowledge that I don't have the answer to this situation and you do. That is also a sense of submission that comes from hod. So I think we'll stop right here for a moment. We'll open up the floor if anybody wants to make a comment, and otherwise we'll continue to the idea of the 6th Sphira that we'll discuss today, the 6th soul power, which is Yesod, foundation, also quite interesting. So we will, if anybody wants to share, now's a good time. Oh, I have to unmute everybody, otherwise I can only hear myself. Okay, here we go.
Is hod also humility?
Hod is humility. The question is what we mean by humility. Humility means, again, what does humility mean? The humility is a tricky word, especially in the West. Humility, people think, says, oh, I'm nothing, oh, I'm nobody. That's not humility. Humility is, as we discussed with the Passover classes, humility is the ability, and not everybody has this ability. Humility is the ability to see that something is greater than myself. There is something greater than me out there, and I want to connect to it. And one way to connect to it is to be devoted to it. And some people don't have that skill, but that's a very powerful skill. If you can harness that, you can achieve a lot.
So, Rabbi, when you're in the netzach mode, when you're in the victory mode, you're becoming victorious, how do you call upon the Hod to balance it out a little bit?
Well, it depends. You don't really want to. Okay, so it depends. It depends. Sometimes what you want to do is you want to just awaken the Hod to put down the netzach. Other times you want to channel the netzach. I have to win. Okay, I'm a person that has to win. Every night before I go to sleep, I happen not to be that person. But some people, every night they need a win. They need a win, okay? So now the question is, where am I going to get my win? So I could say, I'm going to argue with my 6-year-old child until I win, right? That's obviously a negative place to get my win. So I have to find positive expressions for my win. What's my win? My win is, it's very hard for me to jog a half a mile. Okay, you know what? I'm going to jog a mile today. Okay, so now I am feeding that part of myself that needs challenge, that needs a win. So a person has to. So sometimes the issue is I have to redirect my victory. That's one angle. Other times I have to exercise the Hod. I have to practice being humble. How do I practice being humble? I'm not sure. I'm kidding. Not kidding. I'm not sure how to practice being humble, but there is an exercise of somebody where, for example, a person practices humility in the sense of practices being thankful, right? So I have to take the time. Let's say I'm in a dispute with you, and I say, I can't even understand why you're saying what you're saying. You're so insensitive, et cetera, et cetera. So I have to stop, turn my victory off, and say, now we're focusing on submission, on gratefulness and gratitude, and say, let's not focus on our differences. Let's focus how grateful I am to you because of what you do for me. Let's take out a paper, write down 10 things that you do for me, that you make my life better. Things that I could not achieve without you. I would not be complete without you. Let's say I'm in a relationship and I tell my significant other, I say, look, imagine you're going on a date and you say, look, I'm a perfect person. I have no faults. I don't need anything. I don't need anybody. If you want to join the relationship, you're welcome. It's not going to work, right? A relationship has to work. I have to say I am incomplete. I don't have everything I need. You would add something significant to my life. So that is the truth. The question is, how do I tap into that truth? How do I meditate on that? How do I realize that the person I'm arguing with is actually giving me something more than something significant, and I should be grateful for that. So I think that gratitude is very closely related to the concept of Hod, of what we're calling submission or humility, but gratitude is probably also an important component, important ingredient of Hod. So that is for that. Anybody else wants to
Rabbi, am I muted or unmuted?
No, now I hear you loud and clear.
All right, so here's my question. Just as if one exercises, one wants to exercise a range of muscles, both upper muscles, upper body and lower body, there are certain exercises you have that develop these various traits in people who wish to develop them.
You're asking me, what are the exercises?
Yes.
The short answer is, and unfortunately, the short answer is that the Kabbalah doesn't necessarily tell you exactly how to do it because it's a personal thing. And as you know, you're the doctor, you're the therapist, as you know that it's a great skill to help people apply this. It's not so simple. But what the Kabbalah will tell you is that if I'm a person that I need victory, right? I have to bring more victory into my life. So the first thing the Kabbalah tells me is, let me just mute a second, I'll just hear myself. the first thing that Kabbalah tells me is I have to know, like you say, it's exercising the power, but I have that soul power, right? So someone comes to you and say, I can't do this. I can't. What's the answer? The answer is you could. The answer is everybody has all 7 soul powers. Now the question is, how do I practice? How do I look at the scenario and look at it not as a challenge that's going to take me down, but as a challenge that would intensify my skill, right? Like if I'm playing basketball with you, or football, or golf, whatever people are playing, when I see the opposition, it actually gets me to dig deeper. So the short answer to your question is, I don't know of a specific all-around activity, but I think people have to tailor it for themselves. But the idea is find places in my life where I love somebody. I may not feel the love at this moment, but I'm going to push through and I'm going to commit to it because I'm going to push through because I committed to something in the past, right? So, what's an example? What's an example? My mother tells me that it's not a very deep story. It's not a deep story, but it's for some reason it's one of the things my mother taught me, and it made an impression on me when I was young. So my mother tells me about her father, that when she was 16, she decided she wants to get a license. And at that point, you have to go to driver's ed. And then she signed up. And then after a while, she got tired of it. And then she wanted to quit. And her father said, you can't quit, okay? He didn't force her to sign up. He had no interest in her driving. But because you signed up, and at one point this is something you really desired, right? But love alone is not gonna carry you through. So you have to find it within yourself. Know that you have the capacity. Say, I loved it yesterday. I'm going to love it tomorrow. Push through. Be victorious. Overcome. You can do it. And that is the power of Netzach. How does people self-inspire, self-talk, or give themselves self-therapy to do it? Everybody has to find their own tools to apply this. But these are the overarching principles. And again, if we apply this properly, this can literally change our lives for the better. I hope that, I'm sure, Doctor, I'm sure that was not satisfactory, but
It was a good shot, though, and it's a lifelong journey for all of us.
indeed.
Rabbi, you have some questions on this.
Oh, so I have some questions. Mark posted a question. The question was, are Netzach and Hod opposites? The answer is yes. Just like yesterday, we said that chesed, giving, love, expression is the right side. And then respect, which is basically making space for somebody else. Pulling yourself, not about me, it's about the other person. Those are two opposites. And the middle is the blend. So too, Netzach, victory, is very much about self-expression. And Hod, being thankful, being committed, is the opposite of self-expression. It's about committing oneself to someone greater than self. So to something greater than self. So it's actually almost like escaping the self. So let's think about it in a relationship. In a relationship, some moments of the relationship are about self-expression, right? I'm in this relationship. I like to hear my voice. I like to say jokes. I like to, I hope someone's gonna laugh at my jokes. My grandparents had a great relationship because my grandfather loved to tell jokes. And my grandmother always laughed at the jokes. And we couldn't understand why she's laughing because we all heard the same joke so many times. So she said she doesn't remember the jokes. So either she has a very bad memory or she's a very good wife. It's one of the two. But the bottom line is sometimes in a relationship, it's about self-expression. I want to express myself. And that's a very important part of the relationship. And if I don't have it, that's problematic. On the other hand, part of a relationship is saying, right now, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go out to where you want to go out. I don't want to do it. But there's something greater than myself. What is greater than myself? This relationship as a whole. And because this relationship as a whole is greater than myself, I am committing for the sake of this intangible idea called a relationship with you. I'm going beyond myself. I'm doing what I don't want to do. I'm submitting in a sense to do what you want. And that's a very powerful force within the human being because people if they commit to something, they can achieve tremendous success. And again, there's two types of commitment. There's a commitment that's inspired by opposition and that awakens my ego. And again, in this sense, ego is not bad. Ego is perfectly fine. Self-expression. And then there's a concept where I commit because I sense that there's something greater than self. Now is not my time to think about what I need. Now is the time for me to think about what is needed of me for the greater good. That's a very powerful force in human nature. So that was one question. The second question.
Oh, Rabbi, I don't know if this is Beth. I don't know if you were going to answer this question now.
Go ahead.
But I had typed the question. Isn't practicing humility an oxymoron?
The short answer is practicing humility an oxymoron. So I'm just going to put, I'm just going to mute everybody if it's hard to hear. I'm muting everybody so no one could disagree with me. No, I'm kidding. Is practicing humility an oxymoron? The short answer is absolutely not. We do it in prayer. You wake up in the morning, you say, Moda Ani, I am grateful. What does grateful mean? When I wake up in the morning, I think it's all about me. My job is to tell myself how great I am, and for me to pursue all the pleasures and all the things that make me who I am. That's what I think. Then I practice humility. I put my arms together and I say, I'm grateful to God. Take a moment. Think about what God does for you. Think about your life. It's not really yours. God gives it to you. And I do that at Modani when I'm still in bed, and I do it in prayer as well. Hodu la Hashem. I do it in the Amidah. So I think practicing humility is critical because humility is not always natural. So in fact, it does need practice. Now, in the sense of humility is telling everybody, humility as in, running around and telling everybody that I'm actually not that important. In that sense, we're not referring to that degree of humility, but we're talking about humility. Can I recognize that there's something beyond myself, there's something greater than myself? In that sense, humility not only could be practiced, but must be practiced. Okay, I'll take one more question perhaps, and then we'll go to the last one of the last unit of this Sphira, the last one of this group, which is Yesod, foundation, and then we'll conclude for the day. Unmute all. Okay, anybody has one? Okay, if I have one more, I'm happy to take another question. Otherwise,
when you were talking about holy, submitting to someone greater than self, in essence, every time we say Baruch Hashem is doing that.
Correct. I would say that it's every time you say it, but more importantly, every time you feel it. The problem with me is I say Baruch Hashem 10 times a day, but then the question is, do I really internalize that? Do I really feel thankful and grateful? And the secret is, the more I feel thankful, the more I really internalize the feeling of Baruch Hashem, the happier I'll be and the better life I will have. So it's very important to practice saying Baruch Hashem, thank God, but it's also equally as important to try to internalize it and feel it. And if I do, I'm awakening the emotion of Hod, of the idea of gratefulness and submission.
Thank you.
Okay, Yesod is a little bit tricky. Yesod is literally, it means foundation, but what we in our discussion, Yesod would also mean connection. And the reason why we call it foundation is because in some sense this is a foundation of every relationship. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to what the Zohar says, that every sphira is connected to one part of the body. So the first three is right hand, left hand, and torso. The next three are right leg, left leg, and then you have the Yesod foundation, which is the reproductive organ. Okay, so what does reproductive organ mean? It means as follows. Up to this point, when we spoke about emotion, we're talking about processes that are happening within the person himself. I feel love. I feel like I want to become one. I feel respect. I feel like I'm in awe of something greater than me. I feel victory. I feel submission. All these things are happening within myself. But then the question is, ultimately, the purpose of emotions is to allow myself to relate to other people. So where do I relate to other people? Where does my emotion flow outward to the other person? That's Yesod, that's the foundation, that's the reproductive organ. What do I mean? What do we really mean? So Yesod is foundation, it's connection, but more than anything else, it is focused connection. What do I mean by focused connection? So I'll give the metaphor that the Tanya offers, and then hopefully I'll try to explain it or illustrate it with an example from my life, which is the places where I don't have Yesod. And then you learn from me and you do the opposite of what I do, and then you'll have some Yesod. When I was young, my father taught me, he said, you can learn from everybody. Some people, you learn how you should act, and from other people, you learn how you should not act. But make sure you learn from everybody. Okay, so the Tanya says as follows. The Tanya says, let's say there's a father teaching his child. It's not going to work. It's not going to work just to say the wisdom. Because if the child is just listening to a recording of the wisdom, it's not going to penetrate the way it would if a father is teaching the child, and the child really feels that the father wants the child to understand. That's a critical component according to the Kabbalah. That's the Yesod, that's focused connection. So I don't know if this resonates with people, but this is the way I think about it. Sometimes, I don't know if they did it in your days, but in my days, the kid would come home from school and his mom would say, well, how come you're not learning in class? And child would say, you know why? Because my teacher doesn't care about me. I don't know if that ever happened to you or you heard anybody say it, but that was one of the excuses we used to make as kids. Now, what does mother say? Who cares if the teacher cares about you, right? It's your test, it's your grade. You have to get into Harvard. Doesn't matter what the teacher cares about you or not. But from the Kabbalistic perspective, what this child says is very true. A person, if they're going to learn, they have to feel that the person conveying the knowledge, the person in the relationship, really does care about them, right? There's a saying that I heard from Rabbi Simon Jacobson. I don't know where he got it from, but maybe he made it up himself. I don't know. He says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, okay? So you can't really get from somebody unless you know that that person is focused on you and really wants to have this relationship with you. So in simple English, Yesod is the ability to block everything out and focus on the person you're relating to. Much easier said than done. Okay? So to illustrate, let's say it's my anniversary. So I take my wife to the restaurant, and it's a wonderful time, and I really, really feel an intense love. Wonderful. And then I get a text message. So I'm feeling love. So what's a text message in the face of love? The text message cannot disturb love. So I pick up my phone and I answer my text, right? From my perspective, I put it back down. Am I changed? I'm the same. I still feel the love. The person I'm with, my spouse, is offended. And my spouse says, you don't care about me. Because if you cared about me, you wouldn't look at your phone in the middle of dinner. And I say, what are you talking about? I promise, I love you. I'm feeling the love in my heart right now. And then she says, no, you don't love me. You don't care about me. Okay? Who's right? Now, the problem with this guy looking at his phone is not that he's rude. That's a separate problem. That's not the real problem. There's a deeper problem. What's the problem? So let's think about this debate. Wife says you don't care about me. Husband says I love you. Who's right? I feel the love when I'm answering the text. Who's right? Of course the husband is right that he feels the love. The problem is what he doesn't have the Yesod. He doesn't have focused connection. That's what Yesod is. Yesod is the ability to look at somebody in the eyes, and that person will feel connected to you. That's what the Yesod is. Feel that intangible connection. It's also expressed in the reproductive organ because really that's where you focus the relationship, and almost the culmination of the spiritual relationship can also be expressed in the physical act of physical intimacy. But that's another story. We'll get to that maybe tomorrow when we discuss Malchut, kingship. But the idea is that there is a force within the soul where I look at you or you look at me and I feel that there's nothing else in your life. And even if you love me, that's not enough for me, because the foundation of any relationship is the yesod. And this is very difficult today more than ever, because today we have built-in distractions. And I'm sitting with my child, putting my child to bed, and if I'm distracted, if I'm looking at something else, or I'm waiting for something else, or my mind is somewhere else, the love is there, the respect is there, the victory is there, the submission, thankfulness is there, everything is there, but the relationship is missing its most important foundation. The most important foundation is the focused attention. And there's a soul capacity. When you see this, when you have this, you sense it. When somebody looks at you and there's nothing else in their world at that moment, you see that bond, you feel that bond. It's very common with young children. With adults, it's a problem because adults are more distracted. So that's the yesod, the ability for somebody to make someone else feel as if they're focusing on them, they're focused on them, there's nothing else that matters at this moment. So I hope this is at least somewhat interesting or understandable, but that I think is a taste of the next three. Again, to summarize, and then we'll open up for questions. Netzach is the right side, is victory. I don't feel the love, but it's the branch of the emotion. It's the capacity, the energy that will overcome all obstacles. And I may have alluded to it before, not stated explicitly, but the Kabbalah says Netzach, the power of victory, is rooted within the deepest place within the human soul. A person would sacrifice anything to be victorious in certain instances, because if I really touch that power of me, that wants to be victorious in all circumstances, I will be able to achieve literally anything. That's Netzach, victory. The next side is the opposite. It's not the expansion of self. I want to be victorious. It's the opposite. It's I feel that there's something greater than self. I want to commit. I want to do for the greater good. I want to volunteer. If I'm going to help people in the coronavirus, that's something beyond myself. It's not about expansion of self. I'll be more comfortable in my own house, but I want to commit to something bigger than myself. That has changed the world. That motivates people in a tremendous way to devote themselves to something greater than self. And then yesod is, could I focus my attention? Could I focus my relationship? Could I really want this relationship? And could I allow somebody else to feel how focused I am on them, on